This is my new ultimate PC VR build from Stormforce. Let's get into it. The Stormforce Prism 6310 is a top-of-the-line spec featuring a 7950X3D processor from AMD, 32 gigs of RAM and an Asus RTX 4090 GPU, all neatly stored in this gorgeous Height Y60 case. I've gotta tell you, I have never experienced VR like this, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm just too excited. Anyway, if you want to check out the full specs for the PC, I've left a link to it in the description below. For reference, my own PC has a 5800X processor from AMD and a 3070 GPU from MSI, and it performs decently for VR in most use cases, but I've never been able to max out the settings and also get stable FPS while doing it. Playing VR games the way the developers intended them is truly a transformative experience. I've been able to see details I've never even known were there in games I've played 1,000 times. And it's also allowed me to use high-end PC VR headsets like the Pimax Crystal and the Vario Aero, and I'll have reviews coming on both of these very soon and probably a comparison between them, so subscribe if you haven't already. Now let's move on to the actual gaming experience. I'm using an app called FPS VR to show you some performance metrics on screen, while I tell you about my experience with high-end PC VR. I'll be using my Quest Pro for these tests, as it's a good middle ground for resolution and frame rate. I of course had to start with Half-Life Alyx. This is a game that I thought looked great even on medium settings, but boy oh boy, it's even prettier on ultra. As you can see in the top left corner of your screen, the frame rate is extremely stable and everything has been super fluid while replaying a few levels of this masterpiece of a game. By the way, if you haven't played it yet, figure out a way to do it, because there's a reason why everyone says it's a fantastic game. Now if only Valve would release something else. Come on, Gabe. And I know what some of you might be thinking. Alyx is extremely well optimized, and you're right, but I still wasn't able to maintain any decent frame rates on my other PC beyond medium to high settings. Anyway, let's move on to one of my favorite games and arguably the worst optimized VR title out there, Blade and Sorcery. Now to set expectations, with the game running on medium settings and 0.75 resolution, it would constantly dip into the 30s and 40s on my old PC when there was a lot happening on screen. And when I say a lot, I mean like 3-4 enemies, magic casting, and one of the larger maps like this one you're seeing here. On the new PC, I'm running max settings, and I've gotta say I genuinely don't know what kind of NASA level PC this game was built for, because I still got dips from time to time, especially when using the Fireball, but at least it went down to around 60 frames per second, so I'm happy with that and can't blame the PC. I mean, for God's sake, it's the absolute max spec PC you can buy today. In any case, even with this poorly optimized title, the performance was mostly, as you'd expect, absolutely stellar. Moving on to another favorite of mine, Saints and Sinners Retribution. Again, the thing that struck me the most was frame rate stability. Unfortunately, I couldn't use FPS VR with this one since it runs on the Oculus SDK, but I think it's clear from the gameplay that everything was rock solid both in terms of graphics and performance. And by the way, this is another absolute must play, preferably on PC. Okay, I won't bore you with more regular VR games because it's pretty clear that this PC can run any game that's not been developed to only work perfectly on a GPU that hasn't been invented yet. So it was time I threw something more demanding at it to see how it performs. I bet some of you already figured out where I'm heading with this, and it's sim racing. And if you thought Microsoft Flight Simulator, you're not wrong. That's coming later in the video as well. To avoid making this video an hour long, I'll try two titles, Automobilista 2 and Dirt Rally 2.0. I chose these two because the first is pretty well optimized for VR in general, but still requires a very good PC to crank up the graphics to max. The second one, well, is not that well optimized, and I pretty much had to play it on low to medium settings on my RTX 3070 powered PC to get any decent frame rates. So let's see what we can get now. And to make things even more interesting, I'll be using my new Pimax Crystal for these tests, which has considerably higher resolution than the Quest Pro, so it should provide even more of a challenge for the PC. I'm also not using foveated rendering because I want to test out the raw power this computer can put out. Let's do this. I was expecting this to put the PC on its knees. Max graphics and a full grid of cars. On my other PC, I'd be lucky to get about 30 FPS with this, which for VR racing is the equivalent of needing a bucket next to your sim rig, if you know what I mean. Well, apparently a PC that's about double what I sold my first car for does have its benefits, because everything ran buttery smooth, and the combo of this beast beastly PC and the high-end PC VR that is the Pimax Crystal has absolutely blown me away. The clarity and stability both of these enable is just off the charts. Like genuinely with most other headsets, I just accept that I need to take a hit in terms of visual fidelity because the immersion is just so good. But in this case, it's incredibly sharp and I didn't even know VR could look this good. Moving on, surely Dirt 2.0 would be a very different experience. By the way, I had to use the Steam VR preview for it to work with the FPS VR overlay, and for some reason the recording looks like crap. You'll just have to take my word for it. Or not, but the game looks way better in the headset than it does in what you're seeing here. Anyway, I started in this parking area to get my drift on. RIP Ken Block. I was once again surprised to not only see how good this game can look, which is pretty blurry in VR normally, but again the frame rates and stability were totally unexpected, especially with a game where VR was clearly an afterthought. To make sure it wasn't just this map that was giving me more performance than I could have ever wished for, I tried a quick stage on a map with a lot of foliage and gravel, and I almost did not want to stop playing and get back to making this video. And now it was time to bring in the VR Destroyer. To switch things up once again, I thought I would use my Vario Aero for this test, as it's a great middle ground in terms of resolution, slotting in between the Quest Pro and the Pimax Crystal. But I'll talk more about that in a few weeks when I do my full review of this. For now, let's get to flying. Just a small disclaimer here for those of you who have never played it in VR, because it's a more static experience because you're flying high up, so everything seems to be moving slow. Even 30 to 40 FPS can be absolutely fine for Microsoft Flight Simulator. Asking my wife to keep the fire extinguisher close by, I had to turn everything to ultra settings, with Nvidia DLSS set to auto and again no foveated renderings or any other shenanigans. Not sure why MSFS shows up like this in the preview screen, but the purpose here is to check out the performance. And it's holding steady at about 70 FPS, which again for this insane game is actually incredible. Flying with these settings and maintaining this FPS is a genuinely gorgeous experience. I loved it so much that I will actually start playing more of it, since I just couldn't enjoy the experience before due to poor performance even on the lowest settings. I'm genuinely hoping Stormforce will let me keep this PC for as long as possible, because after experiencing VR like this, it's going to be impossible to go back. It's gonna be like going back to a phone with buttons. And yes, I'm exaggerating a bit, but it's a huge jump in performance and visual clarity, so honestly, if you can afford it, I would highly recommend it. Stormforce also sell PCs for all budgets, so feel free to check them out using the link below. With the Quest 3 around the corner, I can't wait to try it out for PC VR. So subscribe if you want to see me testing it, and feel free to ask any questions you might have in the comments. In the meantime, check out one of my other videos if you have a bit more time to kill. Cheers guys!